Okay, here it is. John thinks he has a genetic flaw. No, he doesn't. It said from birth, Bundy had a genetic flaw. No, he didn't. That made him desire to kill. It wouldn't have mattered how he was raised or where he was from. That's not true. He was going to kill. Oh, okay. He was a born killer. If that's the case, then we need to do we need to rid of that before it even gets older. Our society will always have a few people. We need to see the signs as soon as possible. A few people? Your name is John. We need to watch out for all you men. So here's the problem with this. Okay, so one wonders, are some people just born this way? Their brains wired differently from the rest of humanity. Some say psychopaths are born and sociopaths are made. Perhaps it's actually a combination. Number one, I actually see them as the same. Also, the men that actually created these terms were psychopaths because we're talking about the men, the white men that felt that they were superior to the all races and had slaves and human trafficked. So why then that would mean all you men, genetically are fucked up. Do you want to be told that you're genetically fucked up? All of you. Because you're a spawn of the men from the time period when they actually started looking at that and creating these terms. And as we see in the old terms of psychopathy, when they were going through this thing, they actually classified gay men as being sexual psychopaths. And the problem there is it has to do with the perception of the person actually looking at this. So it's a psychopath looking at everybody else going, I'm actually normal, but I didn't like kill these people, so there's something totally genetically wrong with that guy. Like, I don't know, it's a different perspective. So the problem has to do with indoctrination, the indoctrination and the child abuse. So one of the things that they didn't know when they were going through all this stuff was the amount of abuses that they were doing that they considered being normal. So they normalized sexual abuses and just general child abuse on kids. And we're sitting there beating the hell out of them and going, I don't know why they're coming out monsters. You know, it's the devil. It's this thing. They heavily were into religion. So they looked at all this stuff as blaming an outside source. And the more as we go through it, I go, no, these guys that you guys are classifying as psychopaths are the guys that I classify as sociopaths. But then again, I started looking at Kevin, because Kevin, I called him a psychopath. And the reason why I differentiated him, like this is why I kind of backed off on the term. Well, there was a couple reasons. Because there was, I started noticing some differences in these people. And I was trying to figure it out, like why this one was acting this way, because they're very off cue. And we didn't know much about autism. Not until I started doing benefits for autism in early 2000, and I didn't really understand it because they said this thing and I'm like, what? I don't really get it. It's because I probably am. So that would be the reason why I would go, I don't get it, like more or less when they're telling me this thing. I'm like, what? I do that? I don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, so autism, the person with autism, depending on where they are on the spectrum, can come off sometimes really odd, and it would be ultra creepy if they had this personality disorder because their cues are off. And so you figure, you know, somebody with autism just standing around and staring at you and their cues are off. And so I was like, I don't want to call people with autism psychopaths. Like, it's an addition, like it would be an addition that they have with it. And I go, I think that's kind of what's happening here. And I think it's just a cluster of things, perhaps. And I was trying to figure out what differentiated that type of psychopath that they were calling psychopath to the socio. And then when I was looking at the socio, the classic socio that, I don't know, we call Chase Merritt like classic socio. He's just like the everyday criminal guy You know, he's like that guy you would see like as a trucker, and he's off like killing women, driving his truck, and, you know, constantly in trouble, doing drugs, and, you know, stealing and thieving from people, drop out. Like, that's your typical kind of sociopath. And, you know, Depp has all those type of traits and stuff, of like, dropping out of school, and, you know, they get bored and then they go and do drugs, and their parents are bullies. Like, so we started looking at the background there of him too. And so, yeah, so it's definitely created. The background of his is really terrible, and so is Kevin's. But Kevin, I put him as psychopath because he's a more intelligent guy, and he seems more calculated. And I think that the only differentiating thing between them is that he's more intelligent. So because he's more intelligent, he's going to make different choices versus somebody who's a lower IQ that drops out is not going to be as witty. You know what I mean? He's not going to be as witty as this guy right here. So I think that's the only differentiating thing between the two. And I've seen both of them do the same thing. Like, where they're more calculated, and then some are just spur of the moment, but they've both done these things. And so their perspective of it, I think, is off. It's been off. And we've been seeing this in therapy things. They've been off all the time, and it changes after like 10 years. Then they're like, we don't want to call it that anymore. We're going to call it ASPD. And we're going to call it this, or we're going to call it that. And then for some reason now it's very focused on narcissists. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's part of the trait in there. I don't know of a narcissist that is not a sociopath. So, but they call him that and they go by that. And so I'm like, well, that's the same trait as a Ted Bundy. It's just that they're all different, but they do have that God thing, and that's how this all came about. That's what I was saying. I go, the religion thing came about because of that. We had a narcissist. I mean, we had a sociopath. We had a guy that feels like he's God and that he's untouchable. It's like this thing about it, and then they create things about it to get people to worship them. You know, it's this thing. It's feeding into that thing. Um, so yeah, their perspective early on, I think, is completely wrong because, again, you have people that are slave owners and that are human traffickers that think that God put them on the earth to be the leaders of the planet. The level of narcissism on that alone is extraordinarily high. And so for them to sit there and go, oh, we're the totally fine ones, but what's wrong with these black people? And what's wrong with these gay people? And so that's where the perspective was coming from. So I was looking at that, and you have to question it because they don't have enough data. They don't have enough research done to know the childhood, you know, dynamics there. That's number one, because nobody was ever honest. The amount of rapes going on, the amount of child molestation going on, the level of all of this is not in their research properly, and we are barely getting that information now. And so in order to get get a proper assessment of what is wrong with these guys, you have to have all that on the table. Otherwise it just becomes, somebody's just born that way. Nobody was born like, I want to go kill women. You know, there is a thing about survival. So it's like, if I need to survive, I may need to take someone out. You know, it's kind of that thing, like in nature. But not to go just run around just murdering people for the whole fun of it. And a gender. So our gender, you're John. So your gender was not degraded throughout history. So there's a lot to that. And they had mothers taking care of the sons. And I go, yeah, that dynamic right there is actually important too, because if the mother is abusive, which they called normal parenting at the time, then the son can grow up to have a hatred towards our gender on top of the other verbal garbage that is going on. And that is problematic. And then you got all these guys hating their mom, and then they go after women, right? You'll see this even with celebrities. They had problems with their mother, and they started going at women the whole time. Okay, and they still have problems. So, and it isn't. They're not. You know, they're not corrected. You know, still. But and they minimize the conduct of their male friends That's why they do the gangbanger thing and they start getting into a group of them because they're all fucked up human beings. So they relate to the other rapists and they minimize that conduct on a gender. So they promote hate violence, hate crimes and violence on a gender. So that they minimize because that's fine and it's totally passable and that's justified somehow in their brain because of their early childhood of their abuses from their mother or any other female above them. And so I found it to be an important area mostly for women, but women are violent to us too. And so uh it also could have a dual thing going on too, where it's because they're violent to the sons and then they become violent to the daughters. Then the daughters start becoming bullies to other women. Like it's this dynamic that they did not look at. And then also I don't think that they really viewed it on a spectrum at the time. It is on, I fully believe it's on a spectrum because I'm not a sociopath, but I can go look at behaviors that I've done in the past and go, I'm being a I'm doing sociopath behavior, right? Like something that they would do. And then I could try to correct that. It's not on this portion where it's like, I can't be fixed or something like that. But then if you get on this further end of the spectrum, I mean, you're kind of permanently like that. Mostly when you're fully detached from other humans. Like I'm not fully detached from other humans. I don't want to hang out with humans. That doesn't mean I'm not attached to other humans. Like I can't attach to humans. But the level of where Ted Bundy is detached and they're objects and he just does whatever and he doesn't care. He has no uh, care that they exist. That's how come a mass shooter could do what they could do most of the time. Because they're detached from those people. They're just objects and they're just like part of this, plot of theirs that they could just go take them out. They don't care. You know, they have no thing to them. So it doesn't affect them. Like what a horrible thing, right? You can't imagine it unless you are one because the thing it has to do with being separated from that there's a detachment issue. I mean, you don't need to go to school for that. It's like you could tell right now. It's like you don't have any attachment to little kids. Like who could sit there? It's like watching somebody kill a little kitten, right? It didn't do anything. It's this poor cute little thing. But to them they get enjoyment off of doing that. And so that's why they can easily do something that horrific, but they're not attached to it. They don't have those emotions. They get the emotions of feeling that they overpowered them and they could just take them out and it makes them feel good. The more evil that they do, it makes them feel good because they're miserable chronically. And it's different than what's going on with me, right? So I'll complain about all these horrible things in the world, right? So we'll go on this thing. That's a different thing than how I'm feeling on the inside being a miserable fuck. It's like that would be like me feeling I don't know how would they feel. They're just miserable in life and they're angry and this and that. And so in order to feel good, they need to go out and hurt somebody. And then when they hurt somebody else, they feel good. That's why that sinister face comes up. That's why I said I go watch out for that face because that's the brain activity right there. I go, I don't that but that's what's making them feel good. They could be imagining chronically like I want to kill them, and then they get an enjoyment off that type of imagery. And then and I don't know if they're all doing it though, but it's kind of one of those things like one day they can and they're not all serial killers, but they could 20, 40 years down the line and then take their family out. So it's kind of like that area right there. And so no. Genetic, no. I kept saying I go if there's anything genetic, it would only have to do with somebody predisposition with maybe depression, like something like that. I mean, it wouldn't sit there and tell them women are trash and we're gonna go kill them all. But I don't want to throw them Gardner down because that's what they said, that's what they've been saying, and I actually disagree with it. And only because of all the information that I've collected over about 20 years on men's dysfunctional bullshit here. Um, that now, like when, like I was trying to explain this, I go, the whole thing when I got all this information, it wasn't to analyze it and go, oh, this is what's wrong with all these guys. It was more of, oh, this is your thing and that's what we're going to do. This whole other thing about it. And I didn't really question it, like the whys about it, right? The whys about why that they're like that. And then even when we started to, it was kind of like, oh, it's no big deal. We're not judging you. It became this thing, but we didn't really analyze that. Now, some other people may have, but it wasn't. It's not like it's a expected thing in that field. And it's like if you want to be interested in all that, then you can go deep dive into this other thing. It's more or less at the time that a lot of those women were more into like the fantasy stories about, this and that and the other versus why is this guy wanting to relive being abused by his mother and it's a turn on to him? You know what I mean? Like this thing about it. And as I was going through this stuff, it was like you could also be a sadist and not be a killer and not just run around and wanting to hurt everybody. So there's a line here, there's a thing here. And so, you're just kind of breaking down all these little, things that we already know and what we didn't know. But I did know on a level. It's like this weird thing. It's like I already knew on a level they were all being sexually abused. On this level, I knew they were all being sexually abused. And it's funny because they used to always say that. They're like, if women, they always say about women though. They go, when women get into that industry, they're all abused. I go, well, that's not, everybody was abused though. So the correlation does not equal the cause. I mean, there is a correlation probably to some of that, but everybody is, right? But did everybody choose to go do that? No. And it actually wasn't a main choice of mine. It was more of a accidental stumble into thing. And then it was meant to be temporary, and then it turned into wait a minute. Like, wait a minute. And actually, I don't regret it on any level because I think it made me about 1,000,000 times more intelligent on this topic, and it revolves around people harming me. And I'm going through cold cases, and I'm noticing, like, you start to notice, like, these things, and I go, oh, it's all, like, connected together. And then they throw out, oh, all these kids got raped at this, like, private, Catholic church school thing. And it started going, oh yeah, because all these guys used to come in and they used to want to relive their thing at this church school, at a Catholic school. And it's almost like this like duh thing, but the thing that stopped me from going there was because number one, men kept saying that they're not victims of anything. And so you don't like really associate, oh, they got abused over there. Like you just didn't go into this deep thing about it. You just think they just want to live some like wacky, bullshit out and, go through this thing. And then, and not thinking about it as a mass crisis, like it happened at all these places. You needed more information to go there. I don't think I would have picked it up any other way because it's a limited scope view from only people that are coming there, right? So it's not outside that, spectrum, outside that universe right there where I'm getting that information from other people elsewhere. Because if that started happening, I think that would have really came about. But you're not. So you just think, oh, it's just this universe right here, just these people. They're just, on, this other universe of things and want to do this, right? But then if you had that information outside, if you knew like all these guys going, oh yeah, when I was at this Catholic school, or when I was in this private school, this thing happened and that thing happened. And I think that the more you got those things simultaneously coming at you, I think it would have been much easier to go, oh my God, versus, taking 20 years to go finally. Well, it was less than 20 years. I figured it out, I don't know, just a couple years back. Just a couple years back, because I go, oh, all this stuff is connected. Because when I'm going through the case, I go, oh, it's the same thing as this. It's the same thing as that. And then these cases are coming out where all these people are like, yeah, I got abused at this school thing, or, those military schools, or, whatever those things are. And I was like, ah. And then all that information came back because it wasn't relevant to me at the time. It's relevant now. But I know that information. And I'm like, it's not good. And that's why a Ted Bundy came out. Those things right there. So I know where to look. That's what I'm saying. I go, oh, wait, I already had that information. I just didn't. And nobody else did either because they were mocking the community. They were calling everybody a bunch of freaks. They were doing all these things. And I'm like, you don't understand something though, because there's some major problems here. So I started, actually, it's not totally true. I noticed one thing. There was a couple things in this. When I started coming out talking about the spanking thing, I go, you guys need to stop doing that because I'm pretty sure that is correlated. This thing right here is correlated to child sexual abuse, and you guys are not viewing it in that way. So the perspective of what the abuses were, they didn't see it as sexual abuse. And so because they didn't see it as sexual abuse, they didn't really care that that was coming out. They also don't really necessarily see it as being a bad thing for an adult to be like that. But it's not normal. It's not normal. And it can turn into a sexual abusing adult because then we saw it with the pastor, right? So with the pastor guy that was like, I really want to get to your butt. I'm like, you need to stay away from me. I was like this little kid, right? So he's gets gratification off of doing that, but it was done to him. And I was like, you guys need to stop this because the sexual abuse on children, which you just because your perspective of it was not, it actually was. And so now it's a permanent thing with those guys. And they also enjoyed doing it, and people were handing their kids to them. It's like, let this stranger put his hands on some kid's naked butt, and then they end up getting molested. You know what I mean? This whole other thing. So I started bringing that up in early 2010 or so, somewhere around there. So yeah, I was kind of nitpicking at it. Yeah, I wasn't very strong in the opinion about it though yet. I mean, I knew about that, but I wasn't going deeper into this other stuff yet. I know that much. And then just one day I was just like, oh no. I was like, oh no. And then I was looking at the football thing, right? And then it was actually worse than we thought. And it's still not even all out here, you guys. It's worse than what you think. It's worse than what you think because of the normalization of those sexual misconducts on children among each other kids, and among adults on kids. It's you probably know it on a level, but you may not know it on the level of all the schools and all the things that they did, and then how that actually transpired to them being an adult with those same things now, that it turned to something sexual to them, and then also that they harm other humans because they got harmed. I mean, it's an action of getting beat up, but then at the same time, it's a combination of a sexual act. So the sexual act and being beat up together. I mean, it's a lot of things. So I don't know if Bundy was beat up. I don't know if his mom beat the shit out of him. It would have been a normal thing for the mom to beat the shit out of him. It was a normal thing back in that time period to beat the shit out of your kids. I mean, it just was. They had corporal punishment in school still. They had corporal punishment still going on in the 70s right there. And then I believe into the 80s. I don't know when it actually, and it may not have stopped in some of these schools. In these Christian ones, that could still be going on somewhere in the middle of Alabama. Okay, I don't really know, but we know with the Duggars they had that going on. They were doing all kinds of things like that. So it's in that thing right there, and that's why they come out like a Josh Duggar. So that's why I was like, yeah. See, so they hadn't been open about those stories. It just happened to be a reality TV thing, and then it came out. And I go, there's so much to take away from that. It's not like they're alone. It's not like they're the only family with that. Kathy Griffith was talking about that, and I didn't even know that happened in their family. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Um, yeah, and she was like, they don't care about the gender. And it's funny because and they will have a preference, but the technicality is if they're fine with rape, they're just fine with rape, and they wouldn't, they're just, their enjoyment is causing harm and punishment. I mean, it doesn't really, matter. Like the way that they'll think about it is just like, it's just jokes. So I'll go do it to this guy, but I'm not gay, but I'm going to go do it to this girl and I'm into women. They could do this whole thing. It's just the perpetrator, depending on their thing. But they wouldn't be against it. Because if you're okay with raping women, you're okay with raping men. Doesn't mean they're going to go do it. No, but they're going to be fine with that conduct. And they're not going to turn it in either because they don't see a problem with it. And I'm reading cases of it right now where they're talking about it. Like, I didn't do this. I didn't see it as rape. I didn't see myself doing this. You know. And then they did it to both genders. I shouldn't say both genders, but they did it to male and female. So I don't know what people want to identify themselves are in those cases. But so I just respectfully disagree with the terminology around that. But I've been questioning. I go, maybe it's just the cluster. It's just the cluster, and then they turn that way. That's how I go. There's a spectrum. It's like there's a level of normality, and then there's like the level of empath. So I'm an empath. So I guess that comes about because of abuse too. So what happens is that I will get overly empathetic to everybody to an extreme to where then people run me over. And that may be part of Brittany's thing too. And then she'll get evil and mad and blah blah blah. Like it's almost justified in some way because it's like people abused her, and then so then like she's mad because people will take advantage of her all the time, and then she'll have this massive blow. Like it totally could be that. I don't know. Yeah, prior to 2001, this was me. Well, I'll just forgive him because it was like they tried to do this to me in 92 and they're totally manipulating. They're manipulating. And then my brain went to this area that like I could stab my brain out because I have this hardcore moment that I'll never forget because I was driving and somehow like I justified, okay, going with this perpetrator somewhere. And I was kind of like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I legitimately knew it on a level. Like, it wasn't even like, I have no idea I'm this dumb. Like, because I'm not a dumb person. But somehow I justified it because of all this gaslighting manipulation, and it somehow overrode, like, my common sense. But also as a very forgiving person. So it was always like, I give people other chances. I was that person. So I talk very much against a lot of that stuff because it's going to get you into trouble eventually. So, because it's sort of not healthy. Like there's a level of unhealthy with that thing too. So I was like, yeah, um, mostly in the case of what happened here. So, and I wasn't aware of the further plot on me right here either, which makes it more dark and creepy, later. But it was kind of like, I knew it and I'm driving and I go, there's something wrong with me. And it's almost like my brain just shut out the rational person in me and then just went off with the gaslight. It was the craziest thing, but I remember it to this day. I was literally driving on the freeway and I'm going through my thoughts about it. And, so yeah, now I know what the gaslight feels like. I know how they, do this thing, the manipulation to get you to that point. It's crazy though, but I don't know why I would shut out my rational brain. Yeah, but then later, it only lasted like that psychosis. I'm like, that's psychosis. We'll call it a psychosis. It was a psychosis. It really was a psychosis because I'm on a level where it's like everything I'm saying isn't really true. And also everything that I'm saying is based on a non-real person creating a story and trying to create a reality that's not real for me, and then manipulating my emotions. So there's all this addition into it, and so I'm in a psychosis basically. And then basically what happens is I snap out of it, and then the minute that happened, the perpetrator started flipping the fuck out. And then it started turning into the monster started coming after me, like this thing. So I was like, holy shit, dude. And it's happened before, it's happened even after that, but in different ways. So they're tricky because I'm totally on top of it, but it still could happen because, and it may have been because the manipulations of these people were prior to me getting even therapy, but prior to me being on top of what was going on there. It's just like, you have to be, it wasn't like somebody new came in and then I got manipulated into this thing, but it still could happen. It still could happen because you have to know these people, and then once you could break them down, then you know, oh, they're going to do this. And to not keep throwing it off, because I have done that for some reason. I'll pass off the flag. Like, I know the flags. I totally know the flags, but I'll pass off the flags like, what are the chances that this person's that, right? I will totally do it. And then boom. And it's like, what the? And I know, nope. And all those people have the child abuse in their background. And it's definitely that. If you stop the child abuse and then they still have this going on, then you may be able to start to debate some other thing. But it wouldn't be that. It's a train of thought. Like, nobody's born, I want to kill women. That's just not a thing. And also, I should point out, not all of what they consider quote unquote psychopaths are homicidal. So it is definitely some additions in these things, because they're not, I mean, I wouldn't put, it's almost like this. It's like, I wouldn't put it past them. They're still abusive, but I wouldn't put it, they would do it if it meant something, you know, if there was a reason to do it, some justification to do it in their brain, they might do it. But generally, I mean, it's not like they're all homicidal. Otherwise, otherwise it would look like in some of these other countries where they just go bludgeon each other like 24/7. And again, if it was genetic like that, it would be over here like that too. That is environmental. That kind of crap over there in, I don't know, these other countries, like, you know, where ISIS is and all these other places, you know, where it's just like murder all day long. That is environmental. And if that was over here, I mean, if it was genetic, it would definitely be, you would be seeing it on that level here too. Um, but it's not different. It's just, it's environmental. That's just what it is. It's environmental. You get raised up into blood and gore, and everybody, you know, is totally effed in the head. You're going to see that's how they take things out. That's how they act. That's their rationale. It's crazy, but that's their thing. I just think it's funny that men want to take it as genetic, that they're genetic fuck ups. I was like, we'll run with that. Men are all genetic fuck ups. You know? Um, that's, and that's not what's going on actually. And there's a whole breakdown to the mentality of society and the way that men are raised and not, and what's in society and what's enabled and not. There was somebody that was writing a book on CNN, which it was like kind of on point. It was like one of these things where it was kind of on point and then kind of not. It's like they tried to blame, it was like this. What do they say? Oh, the society, because men feel like a loser if their career isn't like this, so everything's wrapped around their career and blah blah blah. The typical male supremacist bullshit, right? So I was like, yeah, that is a main thing, because you'll never hear men going, what about this woman's career? Yeah, okay, so you'll never hear that. But they were saying that, are we need to re-examine how we're viewing it. And I go, absolutely. And then it got into this thing where it's like, they try to say it's not the parents and it's nobody's fault. And I was like, what? And they go, it's society's. And I was like, well, okay, so here's the problem with that. Yeah, it's societies, but it's not everybody, because otherwise, everybody's sons would be this pile of crap. So somebody's doing something right. You know what I mean? Like somewhere, because I'm not doing that, am I? No. So somebody's doing something right. So there's definitely that thing in it. So, it was the parents. It was the parents. It's just that they don't know how to look at the family unit. They don't know how to look at what's inside, what's going on there, their actions that are actually causing that. And they actually know the answer to it because they have the profiling with FBI. And I go, the profiling that they use, and you heard them when they were talking about the shooter, they go, oh yeah, this thing seems to be the common thing that happens before they go and do that. They look at porn or some bullshit like that. And I go like this though, because I'm debating their bullshit right there. Because I go, what did you guys do before you started work that day? Is it on your phone too? So here's the thing with that. It's like that may be true in fact that before they go do these horrible things that porn's on their phone. But it's also true in fact that they don't need to go do a shoot up and they're going to work and porn is on their phone, right? So I was just kind of like, you may see that, but does it mean that it's not on yours, other people's too, that are not doing that? And I'm trying to pull that out even with the bully thing. I go, the majority of people were not part of the popular clique. So what about the rest of them? They're loners. They didn't do that, you know? So it's not the answer there. It's that the way that they were teaching the parenting and the abuse at home, because it's a secret. It's a secret. That's the thing. That's the secret. And so I'm pushing it. I go, I see where it's at. I see where it's at, and they need to zoom in on it. And then now, as other people now are talking about their family units, they're like, oh yeah, our parents were massively abusive and dysfunctional and blah, blah, blah. You didn't get this long ago. Because if you remember that LaToya Jackson came flying out here and they were calling her crazy and it's not true and all this, their family is the most dysfunctional, you know what, out here. And that there, and it wasn't a comfortable topic. They're like, you keep that in private. That was how they went about it. So how is government to have the proper profiling when the whole thing is a secret and everybody lies? And so I got really comfortable talking about the abuse thing. So, but I didn't before because I didn't even view it as abuse. I thought everybody's family was that way. I thought that's just America culture. You know what I mean? Like, that's just normal life. And that was the problem. That was definitely the problem. So then, and definitely I didn't have one of the, well, I need to not minimize it because it was pretty bad towards that end portion there. But overall, like in the early portions, I think that's where the sanity comes in, because the areas that matter, which is from birth till around that 10-year-old period, that span right there, was actually okay. It had some effed up things in it. It did, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I have these horrible nightmare memories like throughout that whole period there. It's like there is some, like there's a few, things here and there, but it wasn't like, I wouldn't look at it and go, everybody hated me and I was just being chronically like beat up at home or something like that. It was nothing like that. We actually had portions where, I mean, there was, I mean, I just okay, like a normal family. There's a problem though with them using money as a punishment. Is that's the same concept as people using food as punishment on kids. So the money portion is actually what is leading to the global thing with the rich people abusing people, other people that they don't see as, how they want them to be. So they abuse them by removing money and their power. So that actually is an environmental thing as well. That is not from birth. That's actually from abuse, being abusive. And I guarantee a lot of the people that are posting in the comment thing have raped somebody. There's a lot of people here that have raped somebody or molested somebody or touched them in the wrong way. and they don't, I don't know, it's a whole thing where they don't want to admit it, and they don't look at it properly, because even as a kid, it doesn't matter when it happened, it's like you did it, and they don't see themselves in relation to, with these monsters. But there is a lot that do see themselves with these monsters, and they glorify them because they see themselves in them, and so then they start to, I relate to him. And that's why they all gang up together. That's why you see Kevin with all the people that raped everybody. It's the same thing. It's just like worshiping a Ted Bundy. It's, here's Kevin, and they see that he raped everybody, and then all the guys that have done these things go into their circle and they pity each other. It is the that's what they're doing. So, and that's not a normal thing for victims to do either, to go into a circle and start just cuddling each other either. They typically are meant to, we're going to go abuse you. But that's from childhood, that type of action, because their parents were blaming them. Minimizing things, I had been guilty of minimizing things. So I literally know. It's like, oh yeah, I was guilty of doing that before. But I could call it out now. It's like one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, I was guilty of minimizing this guy's conduct, and now I see so and so doing it too. And you have to call them out. You do have to call them out, because the only way I got fixed was being called out. And but I'm not a sociopath. So the sociopath will not, you could call them out all day long. The one on that far spectrum, that person there is not gonna stop. They'll stop if it means, the thing with them, they're such manipulators. They'll stop, and it may only be a temporary stop. They'll stop for the sake of my career. If something's at threat to the perpetrator, they'll stop doing something so they don't lose something else that's, of importance to them, because humans are not, just generally. But yeah, so then they might come up here and be like, I'm not gonna do it anymore, this, that. And then it's kind of like a crapshoot, because then, like, 2 years later, they can go out and rape a whole bunch of people again. They're just manipulating. It's not like they're fixed. They're not fixed. Ted Bundy was a psychopath. Well, I would actually call them a socio, but that's what, yeah. So I'm saying the definition of how they have it is, they would have considered him a psychopath, and the definition of me looking at the other dude yesterday, he's also a sociopath, but they would diagnose him more likely as a psychopath. And I'm just sitting here going, does it really matter, the terms, like, at the end of the day? But I just don't want to differentiate somebody that is a sociopath that's also, like, autistic. And I don't know if that guy's autistic. His behavior, the only thing that was odd with them is he talked robotic. And sometimes those guys, if they're autistic, they could talk monotone. It's just kind of like da 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 da, da, this thing. And but I don't so that's a genetic thing. But the autism doesn't cause people to go out and kill people or rape them. Just saying. But that's a genetic thing. So I was like, if he is autistic, he's just on a spectrum, and it's not really easy to tell. And that's not what caused him to do that. But that might be why they would consider him a psychopath. That's why it's like, I don't know. And I don't know if Kevin's autistic. I don't think he's autistic. That actually, and that's what I'm talking about. So they go, do you think Kevin Spacey has Asperger? I mean, he's an unnaturally talented actor, and I mean, many of the stories about his inappropriate behavior is somebody who's trying to make a move, but does not understand the social norms. I had to go back and look at what Spacey has done exactly. His behavior doesn't sound like someone who doesn't understand norms, but is trying to make a move. He groped men, he exposed himself, he assaulted, he had sex with a 14-year-old when he was 24. Is there a way to find out if... Okay. But that's the question, because... Again, it wouldn't mean, okay, so if he has Asperger's, because we have a perpetrator in my thing that had that, and the Asperger's didn't make the guy want to murder me, okay? So the guy, and he literally lives nearby. Okay, so that guy stalked me for 2 years. He wouldn't listen to the word no. And then it turned into I want to light you on fire and all kinds of crazy crap. And then he wanted me to do torturous things. It was so crazy. So then the cops think it's funny, right? They think he's hilarious, and they don't even arrest him. Okay, this is so the cops are psychotics too. Okay, they're on the same level as this guy. Because if you laugh at that, it actually flags that you have the same problem that this guy does. And so now you have to be concerned about LA, the sheriff's department, right? Because, and then we were, right? And then they turned out to be a bunch of gang bangers, and it was in the area, one of the areas that they actually were talking about. So, now we have a problem, because now we have the cops that are fucking psychopaths, and this guy is a psychopath, and they see themselves as normal to each other. To each other. They see themselves as normal to each other, because they're all fuck ups. And what we do know for a fact is that that perpetrator has Asperger's. But what we also know is that Asperger's doesn't make you a damn psychopath. So I was like, okay, what is the thing going on here? So what would cause that? And so I was thinking about it. I go, oh yeah, because they abused kids that had autism. Oh, they abused the shit out of those kids that had autism, because they were like, you don't listen. So when they were abusing, so that's what the correlation is, or would be, because all these socios that are created from the environment that they're in is because of abuse, neglect, or whatever, right? And so if you look at the one with Asperger's, Annie has that. It's the same story. It's just they also have Asperger's. That's what it is. And I go, well, and then when you look at when they pull out, oh, he's a psychopath, I go, yeah, but that's the guy who has Asperger's. He has autism. Because they're more creepy, because their social cues are off. To me, that's just my opinion of it. Because when you look at the guy in New York, the serial killer, he too seems like he's on the spectrum. And then he's a serial killer. But the autism didn't make him a serial killer. He's just more creepy ass because his social cues are off. And then he's also a monster. So it makes it like ultra creepy. It just does. I don't know why. But people with Asperger's on its own, like people with autism, they're not creepy. Somebody with, I believe somebody that's schizophrenic. And then if they're on the spectrum of being a socio, I think it's kind of the same thing. It's just like they have this addition, and it just makes them even more like, what the hell? But again, those are the ones they were abused as kids. They abused the hell out of kids with autism. Could Kevin Spacey have Asperger's? Yeah, totally. I mean, look at Elon Musk, dude. What the fuck, dude? And that's and you know, puts a bad name on that thing. I was like, because it's not from that. His dad, if you've seen his dad, if you see how his dad was abusive. And so he's just carrying it on. He just doesn't get it. I don't know if the I'm like the ass, he's an ass. I'm like asshole burger. He's because of that. The only thing I could think of because of that is they have learning disabilities. So, but Kevin is a higher IQ, and so you can't pass along. He's so dumb, he doesn't get it. If you bring to me, like the country of Uganda, I'm like the country of Uganda, where they have very low IQs. I mean, extraordinarily low. They're like disabled, in some places. And that would be an addition, because they have mental disabilities, like this thing. And so trying to teach them that, don't murder people because they're gay is like, that would have some type of addition to it. And it's not because they're stupid, that they go and kill, the gays. It's that they don't have the capacity to differentiate reality from, fiction, right? So they believe in some crazy crap, and they don't have the capacity to go, this is bullshit, and we shouldn't do it. It's kind of that thing, because if they weren't indoctrinated into those weird ass religions or things like that, they wouldn't do that. So it was, again, an environmental thing, and then they just don't have the capacity to see out their ass. And we have this in America too, right? With the QAnon crap and all the other stuff. Like, they don't have the capacity. There's a lot of people out here. They don't really have the capacity to go and critically think. And that, actually, I think that isn't that part of the high thing on the IQ thing, is something about their critical thinking skills or something to do with that. I've long forgot. It's been so long. But I'm pretty sure my IQ has just dropped from just dealing with stupid people forever. But I'm dead serious. But they just don't have the capacity. Okay, they just don't have the education. They don't have the capacity to be able to do that. So whatever you threw into their brain very young, it's like stuck. And they don't. They have mental disability, basically. It's on a level they call the R word. In the real way, not, in a derogatory way. It's like, yeah. But again, that's environmental. That wasn't, they were born that way to go kill people like that. But because Kevin is a lot smarter, he's more capable of manipulating much more than the average IQ, and much more than the average school dropout. And that is a huge differentiating thing between them, I've noticed, because the dropout is just not that clever, dude. He has to go rob people's homes and do all these other things. But some of them may also be higher on this. They may be higher IQ, but they're not higher in education to do something else, but they choose to do that. But then sometimes there's very high IQs that then want the thrill of going to rob a bank. So it's not even done out of, I need to get money and this is how I'm going to live. It's just, it depends who we're talking about. So Kevin gets a thrill out of raping people. He gets a thrill out of preying on humans. So it doesn't even have anything to do with his IQ itself, but the level of how he does it definitely comes into play. His IQ about it. So he'll calculate much better, and he's less likely many times to get caught. Versus, I'm a dropout. I don't, my critical thinking skills are not on the level of Kevin. He's an educated guy. So because he's educated, he could read the room. So for him to have gotten along this whole time tells you that he was capable of, just the way he did it. And also society is helping out, keep that monster going. As we see the Piers Morgan helping him out. He has a lot of sympathy for that guy. That Kevin doesn't understand the norms. It's kind of oddball, because if you go back into the environmental thing, what would be the norm for him? Okay, so if you're going in the home life, the norm, it was probably grope my son's, what. That is where we think it went. So to him, just doing that was a normalized behavior. And then what happened, I can go into his thing. So then he did it in school, because now all the stories are coming out. So now we can piece the puzzle together. It's just one of the rare stories out here where we can just go piece by piece by piece. So he's good for something. Okay, so, and then he's going to try to get manipulative, because we know all this. Okay, so so the next story was that he was in a car with somebody else, right? Then he goes and he grabs them, like probably what his dad did to him, because it's normal to him. That's normal to him. As I was saying, as kids that got abused, we thought it was normal. So he's getting this action done to him, more than likely. Then he gets into a vehicle as a teenager, and he does it to this guy. He doesn't get in trouble. So for him, it's like, meh. Nobody gets in trouble, right? So it's another normal thing that he's doing. And everybody was doing, a lot of people were doing this. So it was the norm. The norm doesn't equal to being normal, because there's hundreds and thousands of people doing a crime all the time. Doesn't mean it's normal, but it's normalized. So to him, that was normal. And he's not in trouble for it. And then all of a sudden he starts getting in trouble for it. And so at that point, like, he definitely does. So, I mean, there's not an excuse in it. I mean, at that point, but now it's like an addictive behavior. It's more like that, I think, because they're addicts. It's almost just like, I have to do it. I mean, you don't have to do it, but he wants to do it. He wants to do it, and because he's getting off on the power and control. It's like a drug. He feels like a god. He's untouchable, and he could do it. And he has a major entitlement now. He just has major entitlement. Like, there's so much in it. It's so layered. But you could kind of go there from that. It's not an easy answer. Like, he doesn't understand norms. Well, he initially probably didn't. That's why, okay, so that's why these guys are going cancel culture, because they're like, it was totally fine that I used to grope everybody at school. Like, what is this about? Why are we getting in trouble now? Normalized. To them, it is normal. It was never okay. We called them out then. And we're supposed to shut up. And they're supposed to get off on doing that. So we're supposed to expect it. So yeah, it was normalized. It was promoted and normalized, and it never should have been. And we did call it out. And when you have a society, when you have a society that enables that, that's what's happening. Then we have Sharon Stone, right? That's what I was talking about. I go, she come in, and the white women come and defend him. And now we see black women doing that, and I'm like, okay, they're only doing it because they see white women doing it, and they know that they were indoctrinated in the same thing that white women were, and so they are doing the same thing. They are. They just are. I've seen it all over the place. And I'm like, okay, so this is the area where they need to tackle, like, big time, because you should not be jumping in front trying to save the man. They are their own damn problem. You need to let them take care of it on their own. Like, why are you here trying to protect Kevin? You didn't do it. And why would you want to be that bully to his victims? But that's what's been going on. That's the cycle of all that. That's why it keeps going on, actually. But that's that thing. They want to hear that it's not their fault. The parents want to hear that it's not their fault. So they want to take in, like, they just randomly came out that way. That's, yeah, you wish. And that's the thing, because what that means is to critically look at something you did and take that in. And for a lot of people, that's hard to take in because you literally created a monster. It's not like these people were like consciously aware. I got to create this massive monster. Though there are some people out there that do want to do that. It's not like they're like, I'm gonna create this mega monster that's gonna go out and blow up the place. Like, nobody, most people are not trying to do that. There's other countries where they are trying to do that. There's a lot of things going on in the world that's pretty effed up. But so when that happened, they step outside of it and go, it's random. That must be in their genes. Like, it must be this thing. Not that what I'm doing did that. And then it gets them to question their religious beliefs as well. And I was saying how difficult that is for some people, because it could turn into like a midlife crisis, like a serious, like, breakdown. So they will do anything to protect that in their brain, and they will not look at that properly, and they will blame everything else outside of that universe, and then never get to the point of the matter. That's a horrible thing. I don't, like, I could go through my past and go, oh man, this one time I did this one time I did that. I mean, I'm not this terrible monster, but it's like, you know, you look at it and you go, yeah, and it wasn't good, and I wouldn't even try to justify it. I wouldn't even try to justify it, but these guys here are going to justify it. I would say in a lot of things it had to do with lack of education, things that were social norms that should have never been. Um, Ignorance, like a list of things like that. But I still, did those things. It's not like you get called out and total go in this full blown denial. I mean, but these guys are full blown denial. I didn't even do that at all. And I'm going to gaslight the victim so I don't get in trouble and say, I believe that they believe that that happened, but their brain, there's something wrong with that. You got to love that. I just don't know. And the fact that the public can listen to that and take that in is like, that's even something to run off of is problematic. I love it when you get like 20 women saying it and they're like, all of them, their brains are like this. And we're not even the ones, having power. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh yeah, we just all decided to gather up and do this thing. Now they did try to do this with men too, and there was one case where I did partake in that like eons ago, but to make it up, because I had to make up my stupidity, I re-went into the case and I was like, oh no, I'm the one that was wrong. I don't know why, so we're talking about the society thing about, they said men can't be touched, blah, 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 blah. Oh, all these people just want their money. Okay, so they did this bullshit, and this is from like, when was it? In the late 2000s? So when we're talking about the Travolta case. I was terrible at the get-go on the Travolta case. Absolutely. And then, it wasn't that long later, though. I still looked at it. I mean, I gave an honest, I sat down with it. And then it got to the point where I noticed that there's just way too many people in this. Like, it doesn't make any sense, like, why all these guys would be trying to take this dude down. And they, so I went into it and I realized, oh, I think he paid some people off and then they disappeared. And then, there's all these other things going on. Then I paid more attention to him. So this is before I could really read these guys. Then I paid attention to him and he started mocking, randomly kissing women. So he's doing these things. And I go, well, first of all, why would you just randomly do that? You're just being a perpetrator. And why would you think it's funny? And it's not. And why would you promote that to the public for other people to randomly do that to me? You're an asshole. So then it just tells me more about his character, because that's his real character, not the bullshit of coming out here being like, whatever he does. And yeah, then it was like, oh. So I've made mistakes too, and that was definitely one of them. On the initial thing. And again, it had to do with society and the verbal garbage about men and this thing and that thing. And then they continually were like, God, they all want their money, so they're gonna go and make up something like that. And I go, I would never. Who could do that? And then I had to sit there and think, even with the Michael kids, I go, you would really have to freaking hate that guy to sit there, and then you were hanging out with him the whole time and all these things to just come out and be like, you know what, he did that to me. I mean, you know how horrible that is? The type of human. Now, a sociopath can do that big time. They would have no problem with it. So, if you're trying to say that they're sociopaths, then I would have to see that type of behavior from those victims. But also, in light of that, the sociopath can be victim to other sociopaths. And so it doesn't even cancel that out. Oh, and if you really don't know what that looks like, I mean, even when they go into prison, right? Like half those people, or all of them, are a bunch of socios, right? So it's like, Ted, who was it that did it? Was it Jeffrey Dahmer? Yeah, so he's the biggest socio out here. He goes in there and then another socio kill him or something like that, right? Didn't that happen? Something like that. Yeah, so they could still be victims to other socios. So it wouldn't even cancel it out if I go, oh, two of their victims are total socios. Like, I figure it out. Like, they're running around doing all this crap. It still wouldn't turn into, oh, they're lying. It would turn into a confusion, though, for me. I go, well, I don't know. They have a probability, a high probability, that they're making up something for a money purpose, right? You know, some type of purpose like that. But it doesn't prove that they are. It doesn't mean that they are. That's how difficult it can be. That's why I said, I don't like dealing with the gangbanger cases because holy crap, you're literally dealing with a group of men that have total PD disorders all over the place. And then they're off killing each other, harming each other, and then they're plotting all these things. And it's like, okay, well, in the case, we already figured about 20 of them are socios. And now I got to figure out, you know, this thing and that thing. And then it becomes more about the story itself. And then good luck trying to get the story from a bunch of pathological liars, you know? So that's why it's like, for me, it's better with people, you know, you look at that, people that have, you know, a lot of knowledge how that whole universe works. And then I'm sure it's much easier for them to figure it out than it is for me because it's just too much. It's just too much because it's another universe. You have to be really heavy on those details on those stories. Very, very, very sharp on those stories because those cases will take like 20 years to friggin', you know, solve. What were the social norms? Rape everybody. To be a rapist. They forced 14-year-olds to marry old men. Why? That was the norm. So he does understand the norm. The norm was to go rape kids. I was just like, I said it, I'm sure, in the thing, but I was like, yeah, but that, I mean, you're talking about my parents' era, where it's like rape a kid and be fine and blame the devil and women are, you know, a bunch of sluts. Yeah, so then they're just like, guys can go at it. They don't do shit. I don't know. It's just that was the social norm. That was the norm. It still is. They're fighting it. They want it to still be normal. Where do you think this came from? As you're saying. Because the thing that really pisses me off about Spacey is that he hit on men. Well, you should be pissed that he hit on women too, because there is female victims, and probably bedded them with the full knowledge that many of his conquests would be reticent to admit having had sex with another man. He understood exactly what he was doing. But okay, where do you think, because all this comes from childhood, I'm telling you right now, I know enough to be able to stand on a damn fucking top of a building and freaking screaming out loud. Where do you think that came from? I think like I'm a straight little boy and some man come force himself on me, and then all of a sudden, like, I enjoyed the conquest. I enjoyed that whole thing, the whole thing of that. There's a thing about it. Oprah talked about it. They tried to slam Oprah for that line, and I was like, yeah, and that right there is the problem. There you go. Right there. Okay, so this is what it was. So let me put it like this. Oprah Winfrey talked about how an abuser can be someone that the victim knows personally, like your dad, and loves or admires, which would be your parents, right? It could be your uncles, it could be your sisters, it could be brothers, it could be anyone, right? And by gaining a victim's trust, well, they automatically kind of do because they're family. The victims might not be aware of the abuse, and that abuse may, in some circumstances, feel good to the victim in that moment. And she goes on to explain that this is one of the reasons it's so confusing for children. Kevin. Because why would he? It's almost like he's reenacting the thing. So what was my job, right? So I dealt with people that reenact this type of crap right here. And it's all different. It's circumstantial. And it's not all bad. I just want to put that out there. I'm just talking about there is a huge, and it was actually in the majority that it was people doing this type of thing. The rest of it, at the time, it was just like oddball things that are just, they're nonsensical. It doesn't mean anything. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a thing. But this was very prominent with people. Okay. Different circumstances. I was talking about different circumstances. So this is you need to think about it, guys. It is definitely environmental. It is not genetic. And they may lie, they may do all these things, they may have shelved it differently. There's a lot of things to it. And so then, therefore, the parents are not going to come out and say they did that either. That'd be crazy. However, they've been very open that they've touched their kids' butts and did the spanking thing. So that they're open talking about because they promoted it. So that's part of the social norm. There's been some that were so disturbing that you, I don't know, like when they're not in that state, they're totally like these normal, smart people. But then all of a sudden, some crazy, crazy, crazy come out. And the ones that are the worst to me are the ones with the family thing. And again, I wasn't, you almost want to just go, ew, gross, you're thinking of your parents like that. What the hell? What is that? But at that time, I wasn't really, oh, that must have really happened to him and how it happened, right? It wasn't this thing. It was just like, what the hell, dude? You're a hot mess. You almost think like, oh, they just made up this like weird thing to have these thoughts about them. But no, actually what I think happened was because of the abuse that they did, that during that abuse, then it turned into a sexual behavior. And they're like literally like older adults now. And it's permanent. It's permanent, you guys. So I don't know who doesn't know this, but I know a lot of them, even if they're in a really close relationship with people, they won't even share it. So then they go outside that unit and they deal with that elsewhere. So you could be married to that guy for like 50 years. You don't know. Because I know that you would judge him. Some of the things are not like they're gonna hurt somebody else. It's that it's just so warped. It's so warped that it's like you really should go to a therapist. You know? Yeah, so those people would be all those like funky people. I don't want to call them funky, but the ones with all these major issues, they would be in the age range of 70s today, in their 70s. Kevin Spacey's age, those age ranges. And I know, and I should add, there was a lot of burning kids with cigarettes. My dad accidentally did that to me one time because I put my hand, I don't know, I flipped my arm out or something. It happened one time. I don't recall anybody purposely burning me with a cigarette, but there's a tank of stories of this. That's one action. So sometimes that action can lead to a sexual dysfunction. It's things that people are not thinking about. And then, yeah. And then they need to relive it. And it's like, yeah, they need to feel that pain, that thing there. It's, yeah. So just reading the comments, it's just like America's so dumb that you can't put it in a paragraph. You can't, I mean, I'm talking years and years of education in the area, and it's even taken me time to even dissect like the amount of info I have.